Hey guys, my name is Francisco Hernandez, and today I'm doing another episode in my Building the Shot series, which is a series that I started to basically do as much as possible in explaining one photo that I've taken at a photo shoot. Today I'm going to go over this image on the screen right here of Sam that I did at a photo shoot that my friend Joe was kind enough to invite me to. If you guys aren't already following me on Instagram, I highly recommend that you check me out at FJH Photo. I make every post on there educational, and recently I started to do Instagram story tutorials where I do a step-by-step breakdown of how I created one shot, basically like the Instagram story version of what I'm doing right now. And those have been really helpful, and I got a lot of great feedback on those, so check me out. I'm sure you won't regret it. Before I continue, I do want to let you guys know that this video is actually sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people alike. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity with Skillshare. Skillshare offers creative classes designed for real life and the circumstances that come with it. These lessons can help you stay inspired, express yourself, and introduce you to a community of millions. If you're just starting out, they have classes for beginners on camera settings and even programs like Lightroom or Photoshop, which are two of the most important programs I use for my photography. One class that I'm going to start soon is called Photo Editing Cinematic Styles in Adobe Camera Raw by Elizabeth Weinberg. This class piqued my interest because I'm always curious to know how each photographer who aims for a cinematic look in their photography achieves those looks, and it might influence my own color grading. I see that one section is called Color, Style, Mood, and can already tell you this will be a helpful class because those are some of the things that I look for when I color grade my images. Skillshare was made to learn, so there's no ads, and they're always launching new premium classes so you can stay focused and follow where your creativity takes you. At less than $10 a month for an annual subscription, it's not that expensive at all. And if you're really interested in trying out Skillshare, the first 1,000 people to click my link in the description area below will get 2 months of premium membership for free so you can explore your creativity. Gear is definitely something that takes a big role in how I create my photos, so let me briefly describe the camera and the lens and the lighting. The Sony a7R III was the camera that I chose to go with the Sigma Art 35 f1.2 being the lens that I've been using a lot lately and really liking. The reason why I chose the 35 f1.2 is because I've been using that lens to get a lot of the environment into my photos. I use the Sigma Art 105 1.4 whenever I just want to blur that background, and lately I've been wanting to get it a little bit more in my photos. I also used a 6-stop ND filter that goes directly on the sensor. I briefly went over it in my last video in the Building the Shot series, so you guys can check that out. I'll throw it on the screen right now. It goes directly on the sensor, so I don't really need to do any sort of fiddling around when I adapt it to different lenses. And I can use a lens hood, which is something that you typically can't do when you use normal ND filters. That filter was made specifically for the Sony a7R III, which is why I don't really use my a7R IV a lot for my photo shoots. The lighting used was the Godox AD300 Pro with the 48-inch glow octabox. There's no specific reason for why I chose the 48-inch octabox, other than that's what Joe, my friend, who invited me to the shoot, had on him, and I was a little bit too lazy to bring my own modifiers. But it ended up working nicely because that 48-inch is very nice and soft, and it gets a good spread of light, so it's not anything that's like a spotlight effect, in other words. So now that you guys know the lighting and the lens and the camera and all that stuff, let's go ahead and show you guys the photos that I took at this photo shoot that led into that final shot. This is the very first shot that I took in the specific area of the location that we're working with, and the reason why I wanted to show you guys this one first is because I have her posed on something. That's because I wanted to get some different kind of poses that you can achieve with when you pose onto something or have the model pose onto something. We did take a shot over in the middle of the track that we were walking on, which is what you're going to see right now. But of course, that kind of limits you to how the model's going to pose on her own. And if you have something just to pose onto or lean against, that gives you a lot more opportunities in terms of posing. So that's why I wanted to go ahead and have her against that wooden ledge there, and she can have different kind of poses to work with. Of course, what you're seeing on the screen right now is a shot with the light off. So here's now with the light on. One thing I did want to make sure with this specific pose is that I wanted her chin to be a little bit elevated because the light was boomed a bit above her. So if she were to have her chin a little bit lower, then a lot shadow would be more on her face, and you don't want that unless you ever want to aim for a very dramatic shot in terms of shadows. But again, this is the first shot I took. You can see that the sunlight is kind of hiding behind her, the sun specifically. In this next shot, you can see that it's now onto the side of her. For this shot here, I did like the composition, but again, you have that bright area in the sky kind of competing for attention. So what I do in the next shot is try to just kind of hide it just a little bit more by changing my composition. Again, her pose is really nice, so I wasn't really worried about that. One thing I was trying to nail down was the timing of the wind for her hair. After I took this shot, I was happy with the previous shot, So I was happy with this shot, but after I took this shot, I decided, you know what, that last shot was pretty good. Let's go ahead and take something else. Let's go ahead and pull back maybe and grab a little bit more of the environment. So that's what exactly I did in this shot here. But when I took this shot, I felt like the pose would have been better facing to the left, so camera left. So that's exactly what I asked her to do, and that's why you see the shot here. I was worried about the pose. I wanted it to be on top of there, and I wanted it to be very relaxed. I wanted her hand to be fully extended, but if I had it fully extended, then it would just kind of just be a little bit too far from the body. So I always try to aim for poses where the hand isn't too far or the leg isn't too far, and kind of there in the straight area, the center of the photo. I felt like this pose was very casual and relaxed, so I wasn't really worried about the pose so much, but I was worried again about the wind. When it comes to shoots on a windy day, I do try my best to grab the hair in a certain flattering way, but if the expression and the lighting and everything else works better and the hair isn't too crazy, then I'll let it be and I'll work with that, that hair in post, which you'll see a little bit later in Photoshop. But I was really happy with this composition and lighting, so I wasn't really changing that, and I was just trying to time the wind. In this very next shot, you'll see that the wind again is just changing her hair. I wasn't really happy with her mouth being too open, so I asked her if she can just kind of close it just a little bit, and then I got this shot here. I actually asked her to raise her chin just a little bit as well, and that's what I ended up with. This is actually the edited version, so I'll show you guys the straight out of camera, which is this right here. So you can see that this is kind of a drastic change in terms of color, but not so much in terms of the exposure, in terms of the lighting on her. With my photos, color is very important to me, so I always bump the color as much as I can. That's kind of borderline natural, and just there's a line where it's a little bit too saturated, but also looks nice, and then try to ease my way back into being borderline colorful but natural. So that's what I was aiming for here. I know that the color of her skin right now is a little bit too saturated, so it's a little bit too orange, but I knew this coming into Photoshop, and I knew that this is something that I was going to fix, so keep that in mind. But if I didn't want to adjust the skin tones like that, then I could have just lowered the saturation selectively in the hue, saturation, luminance area, specifically the saturation section. But I didn't do that to this specific shot because I wanted those skies to still be very saturated. I do want to show you guys the adjustment area, the adjustment brush areas that I did, the selections. So I'm going to hit K and show you guys exactly what I did. I brought up the saturation, actually not the saturation, the shadows of all this area that's in red, and you guys can see exactly what that did. It brought up the shadows just a little bit, and I also brought up the shadows a lot in the area where it was just on the ground. So this is the before, and this is the after. So I'm going to go ahead and just zoom in now to show you guys the eye, because this is something that I always adjust. I wanted the eye to be a lot more visible, so I brightened that section. You guys can see the adjustments on the right there. And then with this adjustment selection, I went ahead and just brightened the eyes just a tad bit, just 0.6 stops of exposure. And after I did that, you guys can see exactly what that was. After I did those adjustments, then I brought the photo into Photoshop. So I'm going to show you guys that. But before I do that, I want to show you guys the behind the scenes in case you guys are curious about where the light was specifically. So again, it was a little bit to the right, but basically in front of her in the center. I always want the light to be a little bit more dramatic, so that's why I have it boomed that high so that there's shadows underneath the chin. If I ever needed more power from the light, then I probably would just bring it in a lot closer, and then because of the inverse square law, you guys can get more power out of your lights by bringing it closer instead of further away. So keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and show you guys how I edited the photo in Photoshop now. When it comes to my photos, I always try to keep everything that's distracting from the photo away and removed. So that's exactly what I always try to do first, and that's what I did exactly in this edit first. I removed the distractions. You guys can see there's quite a bit of those distractions, and it was a little bit of tedious work, but I think it kind of overall benefits the photo, so I don't mind doing this little bit of tedious work. I use a lot of the clone snap tools and spot removal tools in terms of this removing the distractions, but I want to show you guys the face because this is a little bit of distractions that I removed. And the reason why, you guys can see a lot of makeup marks on there. Somebody actually commented on my Instagram post or somewhere of another photo that I should have left her scars there. Those are not scars. I can't even explain it to you fully, but I believe what Sam and Joe told me is that she had her mask on, and on the line of the mask, it had makeup from the lipstick, and then it got on her when she was taking it off, and then just kind of made all those marks. So removing the makeup, or actually fixing the makeup, would have taken a long time. So I felt like they're very minimal kind of marks on her face, so I could just remove them easily in Photoshop, which is exactly what I did. So I just wanted to briefly go over that for a second there before I continue. But now let's go ahead and continue to the very next thing. If you guys are seeing the photo right now and seeing that there's that bright exposure, that bright spot in the background in the sky, like I mentioned earlier that I was trying to avoid, I liked this overall shot more than anything. So I felt like, let me just do my best to kind of just adjust that exposure and kind of remove that bright spot in the photo in Photoshop. So that's exactly what I did. I used a combination of just enlarging the clouds behind her and kind of blending that in, and a little bit of the clone snap tool, and that's pretty much everything that I used. The clone snap tool and just enlarging that section of the background, and then just masking it off her hair and her arm, and a little bit of the wooden area in the next to her arm. But aside from that, that's pretty much all that I did to that specific part of the photo for this layer. In this next section, I grouped a couple of different layers together and labeled the group colors, because that's what I was focusing on. And you can see this is the before and this is the after. It's kind of subtle, but I added more magenta to the skin tones, and that's basically the main thing that I did. But I also adjusted the colors in the background. If you pay attention to the sky in the background, specifically this area right here, I felt like it was kind of gray, and I wanted the colors from the sky around her to kind of be the same color. I wanted that gray to become those colors that were around it, so it wasn't really sticking out as just a gray area in the clouds. So I sampled with the eyedropper tool those colors. I aimed for like a colorful section, like maybe like this, and then I just painted it over the gray area, and that's what I did for this specific layer. I changed the blending mode to color. This is actually something that I do a lot in every photo that I edit. I go ahead and try to see if there's any kind of discrepancies or inaccuracies, or those are fancy words, but basically if there's a patch of area in the sky where it kind of looks off and it needs to be blended together, then I'll go ahead and try to do that using this method here. I'll add a blank layer, sample the color that I want it to be, and paint it over that area, and then change the blending mode of that layer to color. And then I just adjust the opacity till it looks normal to me. Now, if you pay attention to the wooden area there, you can see there's a lot of bright green, and I wanted to remove those greens. So I did exactly what I just told you right now. I sampled the color around it, painted it over, and then I just adjusted the opacity. In this case, I left it at 100%, but that's all I did to that area. And then I adjusted the skin tones just a tad bit. Usually what I'll do in terms of the yellows section and the red section is I'll add a little bit of darkness to the photo. Let me go ahead and just show you guys that. Add a little bit of blacks to those sections, and it kind of gives a little bit more of the darkness and richness of that color. So I always do it to both the yellow and the red. And you can see the rest of the adjustments there that I added specifically. And now I'll go ahead and move on to the next section. The very next thing I did was dodge and burn. And it's hard to go over dodge and burn because it's something that takes its time. So what I'll usually do in these videos is show you guys exactly what I dodged and burned, and then you guys can see exactly what it does, and then move on, because I do need to make a video dedicated to dodge and burn. So if you guys are interested in that, let me know in the comment section below. But for now, let me go ahead and just show you guys exactly what I dodged and burned. So I'm gonna go ahead and enable the effect now. So this is the before, and this is the after. Before and after. Let me go ahead and show you guys the dodge right now. This is everything that I dodged. You can see that it's quite a bit. You can see that this area right here was dodged because it was a little bit too dark. So let me go ahead and just show you guys that right now. So this is before I dodged, and this is after I dodged. This is after I brightened certain sections of the photo. Before and after. And then now is gonna be where I burned, where I made the areas darker. So let me go ahead and show you guys that right there. Before, after. So let me go ahead and just show you guys exactly with that little section. All I do is hold down Alt and click on the select the mask, and show you guys exactly where I burned. You can see I burned the fingers, the shadows of the fingers between them, and then the wooden area here, and a little bit of the shirt because I felt like it was a little too bright. And now you guys can see exactly how it was dodged and burned. Before and after. Before and after. I felt like the colors in the sky behind her could be brighter, so I wanted to go ahead and just adjust that. So I got a vibrance adjustment layer and increased the saturation and the vibrance, and selectively painted it off certain sections on her skin, because I felt like it would be too much saturated on the skin if I left it applied to there. So you guys can see the sky behind her, before and after. Before and after. The very next thing that I felt when I looked at this photo, because every time I adjust something, I take a step back and look at the photo and see what's kind of bugging me. And what I felt like in this specific case at this point was I felt like the blues in the sky right here were a little bit too a certain shade of blue that I didn't want them to be. Like kind of leaning towards like baby blue or robin's blue, I think it's called. And I wanted it to be less saturated in that aspect. But I only wanted to affect it in that section of the sky. So I adjusted the blues for entire photo and then just painted it off right here because I did like the blues on the jeans. So before and after. The very next thing I did was adjust the hand color, because sometimes the hand color and the skin color can be different because of maybe the different poses where the hand isn't getting enough blood and it becomes too red or not. So it becomes a different shade. So I adjusted them just to be a little bit more of the color of her stomach and her neck and face and everything else. So that's all I did in that section there. But I also did a little bit of color grading using the color balance tool, and you can see exactly what I did there. And of course, like I mentioned before, I did have a little bit of messy hair going on here. So one thing I did was liquefy the hair to get it to this point right here. The photo is pretty much done at this point, but there's always a point where I'm editing and I feel like there's something else that I can do to improve the photo. So that's what these last 3 layers are. I felt like the eyes can be a little bit brighter and the jeans a little bit brighter. So this is the before and this is the after. I think it's much better because the eyes, you always want them to be very visible. The last color grading area right here, all I did was adjust the skin tones to be a little bit more magenta. So it's a very, very minimal effect. So this is the before and this is the after. And the very last thing I did was adjust the eye makeup on her skin. You can see that the eye makeup was a little bit off. I want to say eyeshadow was a little bit off. So I just adjusted that just a little bit. I didn't fix it completely, but at 100%, you're barely seeing it. You're not really seeing it at the full 100, or was it 12% that you're seeing right now? So I wasn't really too bothered about that. But now at this point, all I have to do is just adjust the image to fit Instagram's crop and just do a little bit of sharpening maybe, and then I'm ready to post it online. So that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys continue to watch and subscribe if you aren't already subscribed, and I'll see you in the very next video.